Even with mass buffs to Griffin Lords, because of the state of the game and Magic right now, oftentimes I think Balthazar Gelt is actually probably the best pick in a lot of matchups. Kislev is an interesting one because they tend to struggle against Flying Lords in general. Like, they really don't have a lot of answers in terms of air control. Really, the only thing you can do is try and shoot them out of the sky. So it's definitely interesting to see Gelt brought here, and it makes a lot of sense just from kind of a faction design perspective. This replay is for Monch, who just dropped a ton of replays on Discord, recently joined, dropped a ton of replays, which I certainly appreciate, especially when we get some nice human-on-human action here. With Empire versus Kislev, he's rocking Balthazar Gelt up in the sky. Lots of cavalry here, 3 Reichsguard and the Royal Altar Griffite, so quite a bit of cavalry spend. That's going to leave him a little bit cheap in infantry, but not totally. He does have 2 great swords, which were also buffed significantly in 3.1. Interested to see their performance here against the also buffed armored Cossars. Got some crossbowmen, some spearmen also. Sterling's Revenge Free Company currently counter-skirmishing against those light war sleds, of which there are 2. Boris leading a bear squad for Kislev here with Warbear Riders, Patriarch. Got some armored Cossars, a couple of Cossar spears as well, and Ulrika as the caster. So let's get things rolling. And immediately we're going to see here a little bit of mistake. Monch even said in his post about this particular replay that he made some mistakes, and this is one. When you're playing against Kislev, they're going to rush you and then stand there and shoot you once they get close, so you have to get ready to counterattack. Even if you're playing in a more defensive stance, and from this build, kind of from the outset, you could probably just immediately start advancing and start rushing and getting attack orders in, but eventually the great swordsmen, Sigmar Sons, do get attack orders in, not too late, just maybe 15-20 seconds, which is honestly, it's not a long time. It sounds like a long time, because it feels like a long time in battle. But the Warbear Riders are going to charge in here. The Reichsguard, 1 unit is kind of thrown in to counteract their mass here, alongside some spearmen. Reichsguard are definitely getting punished pretty hard here, but alright, as long as they're able to hold them in place and allow these other units to operate. Here we see Ulrika immediately get bogged down by the Sigmar Sun, so we're going to take a lot of damage from her. But Shardblade here and a massive final transmutation. This is super important. One of the main reasons why Gelt is so good right now. Yeah, Balthazar Belt is so good because he's got final transmutation, which is just one of the best spells in the game right now. Generally, because cavalry, monstrous infantry are kind of the way to go for a lot of factions. You do see that kind of, because it's single target damage focused, it just kills the model super fast, and like the damage scaling is better for those single target damage spells like Spirit Leech or, you know, obviously a Final Transmutation. Yeah, the damage scaling is just better on the low model count units, especially something as low as like Warbear Riders or Chariots or obviously characters. And something like Fate of Buna, right, that targets multiple models. You know, the break-even point, I don't remember off the top of my head, but you'll see it in the UI if you mouse over, especially Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna. You can kind of see the break-even point, and yeah, things below that tend to take a lot of damage from stuff like Final Transmutation, and specifically because Final Transmutation is AoE, it's one of the few damage spells in this class that is AoE. So good. But anyway, as I've been talking here, the greatswords have advanced under fire, managed to get into combat here in the center. This one out on the side here is also pretty healthy, managed to get in with some spearmen, and it's just cutting up those armored Cossars quite efficiently. Ulrika's Melkothing down the Reichsguard and fighting the Sigmar Sons to death, so she's actually doing mostly fine here. Balthazar's going to charge in though, got a decent charge bonus on his Pegasus, try and fight it out with Ulrika. She's a decent duelist though, so he's got to be a little bit careful there, but with all that resources and kind of support, he should be mostly fine. Warbear Riders are definitely causing some problems. I didn't really highlight it too much, but the Altdorf Griffites ran in to help finish off the Warbear Riders and took a ton of damage in the process. Really not too happy with where Demigryph Knights are right now, especially in light of the severely overbuffed Rail Knights. And obviously, Rail Knights were taken too far for a balance perspective, but I do feel like in light of them getting just a tier bump, I do think Demigryph Knights could just do with the hard tier bump as well. Maybe like 1600 for the Lance variant, 1700 for the Halberd variant, and just make them just better as a unit so they can fight more elite things. there's been a significant amount of power creep, and I just feel like that elite monstrous cavalry class, they don't really fit into super well anymore because they're on the lower end of it, and just power-wise, they can't compete against very good units in that class like Warbear Riders or obviously Grail Knights. I think, obviously, they shouldn't be as good as Grail Knights, or probably not even as good as Warbear Riders, but maybe like, you know, number 4 or number 5 in that class underneath. Maybe like Skull Crushers also you could include probably above them. But they should probably be at least in the top 5. Maybe that's just my Empire bias showing, but they shouldn't be the best in class, because Empire really shouldn't be the best in class at any one thing, except maybe mobile firepower. Maybe that's kind of their thing now. Anyway, speaking of mobile firepower, Balthasar Gelt certainly is a nuke flying in the sky here. Managed to accrue 1,600 value already, and he's just patiently waiting, getting his Winds of Magic up, I'd imagine, for more Final Chance mutations, because Boris is a beast. Absolute force of nature in a late game situation like this, especially where the Royal Autocrafites have taken so much damage. Empire's got a lot of units, but they don't have much in the way of direct anti-large AP. Crossbowmen have also just been firing this whole time. Crossbowmen, super underrated unit, given how cheap they are. They can get an insane amount of value. Both of these two already. I mean, 1191, and this thing's still got a decent amount of ammunition left. So those crossbowmen just so cost effective when they're able to just sit and shoot. And here, since they're kind of a low priority target, as they often are, Kislev build was relatively narrow. They haven't had anything to oppose them, so some really nice kind of Empire plays here, combined arms, I have to say. Even with some mistakes being made by Monch's own admission. Still nice to see. Force is going to charge in here, though, to this blob of Empire cavalry. The Reichsguard have also been doing a decent job kind of cycle charging around, getting some value in and of themselves. It's just decent Empire play overall. I've been talking more about specific concepts, but yeah. Definitely wanted to just highlight some of the units as they start to kind of get finished off here. We'll see. The Empire has pretty decent leadership, but speaking of units doing well, this Greatsword also, let's check in with them, that came in from the flank and has carved up a lot of Kislev infantry here, 130 models, getting close to paying for itself, and likely will as the late game drags on. Greatswords, I'm trying to remember, I think they got a melee attack and a weapon strength buff, like a straight up weapon strength buff, which will mean they'll be better even against something like Boris, you know, a large character, right? Still heavily armored, and that extra weapon strength and melee attack both apply in that situation. I think it was armor-piercing damage. I'd have to actually go back and check patch notes. But anyway, Ulrika's also still fighting here despite everything. Took a lot of damage, but obviously she's got great leadership, and that hunger also allows her to just keep healing as long as she's not taking too much burst damage. So was able to survive that fight, and it's looking pretty grim right now for the Empire, but miscast is worth it if you get a nice final chance mutation, as Gelt does here, trying to finish off Boris and these armored Cossars. The Patriarch actually drops on that final chance mutation right there. So that was very good. Now Balthasar is going to drop down. It's got to be careful. Ulrich is not anti-large. She is anti-infantry, so she won't be getting any bonuses here. But let's see. He's got Melkos Mystifying Miasma on him. There's no Enfeebling Foe. But she's got, yeah, all of her abilities charged up there. Is on horseback, so those spearmen would be able to support reasonably well. But let's see if she can actually snipe Balthasar here. Balthasar's definitely right in the danger zone, but that final chance mutation finishing off the Patriarch cut off Boris's healing as well, which means now all the damage done to him is, you know, true damage he won't be able to recover from. And those greatswords, again, with that extra little bit of offensive output in a surround on Boris, should be able to help get the job done alongside Sigmar Sons and these spears. We'll see, though. Possible they could just rout. I mean, other than the Sigmar Sons, obviously. These Altdorf Griffites also being forced to chase the Dread Sleds out in melee. Red Sled's, of course, going to be shooting them. If they're on fire, they might be off fire at will, actually, which would be a pretty big mistake from the Kislev player, honestly. Could have probably finished off the Royal Autocrafites by now, but instead they're going to get chased off, it seems like. And, yeah, we'll fast forward a little bit through this late game grind. Boris is going to duke it out there. Goes into a rage eventually. And Balthasar smartly just hanging in the air, supporting leadership, but not at all engaging in melee. Very much textbook, you know, abusing Kislev's lack of Air power, absolutely. Love to see it. Nice replay, even though he said he made some mistakes. Still, overall, very fun game. Nice close game, too. And interesting build. Some things made me a little sad, like how bad the Royal Gryphites did. Other things made me happy, like how well the Greatswords did when they get into combat without getting shot up too much. Even though one that did get shot up pretty severely was still able to get some decent value fighting those Armored Cossars, who definitely are a prime target for Greatswords for sure. Crossbowmen, also a highlight for me. Love these units. Can be so cost effective, especially when they go overlooked by your opponent. Sirloin's Avenge, even eating a charge in the face by those Warbear Riders, still was able to get some really nice damage on a couple initial volleys on War Sleds, as you saw in the beginning there. And the, yeah, also just fighting the Warbear Riders also probably got a tiny bit of value. Anyway, Reichsguard do okay. Balthazar Gelt, of course, himself, the king. Maybe not, but yeah, definitely a lot of value here. 13,000 total damage, almost 4k gold value. That's crazy. I mean, that's fantastic. It's just final transmutation things, but it's smart saving and timing in terms of the usage of the magic, and just not worrying at all really about Searing Doom. It's a nice spell, but really in this situation, it's not as useful, because definitely Boris is the scariest thing in this army by far. Kind of saw that into the late game, although Ulrika actually did way more damage than him, which is pretty interesting. I had kind of written her off there in that surround engagement, but that hunger and the Melkos and everything else allows her to just tank through and carry that engagement, which is super impressive, actually. Warbear Riders, excuse me, don't quite pay for themselves, but do pretty well. Yeah. The Dread Sleds here, the low tier ones, are okay. I'm not the biggest fan of them these days. The upper tier ones tend to be better, but they are pretty expensive, so in a tall build like this, it can just be tough to justify. Not sure if they're more worth it than, say, just bringing like a bunch of dervishes in this situation, especially where you know the Empire is probably going to be bringing some dedicated ranged units in this fight, and the light cavalry are just so good, especially if they have any kind of artillery, so good at disrupting that. So I definitely would probably swap those out for them. Rest of the composition is fairly solid. I mean, Kossar Spears are also pretty decent in this matchup. Maybe you swap the infantry composition slightly to take more of them, less of the armored Kossars. I'm not really sure. Not a Kislev expert by any means, but certainly a fun one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.